Okay, everyone, welcome back. We're going to continue this lecture. Right now, I'll be talking about Mexico, and then after that, I'll talk about Europe and Africa, of how, again, race is being shaped by these events. I want to start off with the conquest of Mexico. As you saw with the reading, Cortez talks about Mexico in a very kind of grandiose way, and he's quite surprised that, they were so well organized and compares it to the city of Valencia. And we do see, Mexico City is probably one of the biggest cities in the world, where it has about 250,000 people living there. And it's actually a really, really clean city, beautiful city compared to European cities. It's actually shaped in a very perpendicular model where economic commerce just flourishes in that town. And, they have city cleanup, they have flowers everywhere. City smells clean, and again very well decorated. And if you look at Europe, Europe is the hush posh of winding roads and just a bit of a mess over there. So when Cortez does arrive to Mexico City, he is in complete awe of what he encounters at this time. So the conquest of Mexico, it's that's a course unto itself, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. But as I mentioned earlier, Cortez was there to make money. If you look at that reading, he's kind of eyeing, ways to conquer this city, and he does at the end. So let's address that. Normally, again, it's a Q&A between you and I, but what we see with Cortez is that he arrives in Mexico with a couple hundred men, but a lot of people hate the Aztecs because they are an imperialist war group that takes over not only central Mexico, but all the way down south to the southern border of Mexico, and everybody pays tribute. So it's not an empire like the Romans, but rather it's more of a tribute system where they conquer different groups and they pay tribute to the Aztecs to leave them alone, basically. So the way it's typically presented, it's Spanish versus native peoples, Aztecs, but it's never really that way. Cortez, as you read in the reading, right, makes alliances with different groups that hate the Aztecs, groups that have not been conquered yet. So the Tlaxcalans is one of those groups. Another thing that kind of facilitates the conquest is that Europeans did have superior weapons. They have low numbers, but they do have some weapons that the native, the Aztecs or even Tlaxcalans have never even encountered. So weapons and even war techniques were very different. Just to give you an example, when Cortez takes over the city of Tenochtitlan, because Tenochtitlan is an island, he actually besieges the island, and the Aztecs were kind of dumbfounded because they never fought this way. They fought, man to man, if you will. And what the Spanish were doing were fighting the way they fought in Europe, which was basically starving out the island. And once smallpox began to hit, it just devastated the island, and it made it easy for Cortez to use his boats and go up there, up the waterways that the Aztecs created, and take over the city. So they did have weapons that were just not, that were just unknown in the Americas. Definitely horses is another kind of major psychological tool that the Spanish used. Horses used to exist in the Americas. At one time they became extinct. And now they came back with the Spanish, and the psychology that played behind the horses was quite impactful, because for many of these native people, they'd never seen a horse, and if you ever stood next to a horse, it's a massive, muscular animal that's quite scary. The Aztecs used to call them dancing deers, because they had no name for this entity, and it just reminded them of deer. Obviously, they were bigger animals, but again, this is another useful tool that the Spanish used to conquer the Aztecs. And there are a few women that also play an important role that the book doesn't talk about. One of them is this woman here, La Virgen de Guadalupe. she's more of a religious symbol, and that comes like 10 years after the conquest of Mexico. But really, this woman over here, La Malinche, so you probably have heard this term, hijos de la chingada, which maybe some of our parents use, when they're angry at you. I got a whole essay on this concept if you like reading it, or if you like to take Chicano studies. It's we talk about this essay called hijos de la chingada that was written by Octavio Paz. But when it comes to this concept, in Mexican culture, we have two women, and it's the Virgin Whore dichotomy. You got the Virgin Virgen de Guadalupe, but this other woman, La Malinche. Now, as you can kind of see in this picture, you have Cortez over here, and you have this woman. La Malinche was a native woman that was given to Cortez when he first arrived to Mexico. She was supposed to be a concubine, but instead she learned Spanish fairly quick, and she knew the landscape. She used to be an Aztec princess who was sold into slavery by her mother, and she ended up in the Mayan region, and she was given to Cortez as one of 20 concubines that they were supposed to just use for their entertainment. But she became very important to Cortez because of her language skills. Translated for him, actually saved his life, rode into war with him. And today, La Malinche, if you go to Mexico, that word is synonymous with being a traitor to your nation. And a lot of historians have challenged that perspective because there is no concept of nation at that time, so she can't be a traitor to something that doesn't exist. But in Mexican folklore, she definitely becomes a very negative figure. And to this day, we still use the word malinchista when somebody does something wrong to you in Mexico. But she played a very important role in the conquest because she overheard talks by native people, and she would tell Cortez about him, and like I said, saved his life a few times. And so she became very instrumental in the conquest of Mexico. And she was about 16 years old when all this happened. Cortez and La Malinche actually had a baby. His name was Martin. And Cortez ended up taking the kid when he went back to Spain, gave La Malinche to one of his military leaders, and just kind of wandered off, just left her there. And she ends up dying at the age of, I can't remember, 24 or 26, of smallpox. But before all that, people kind of associate her with La Llorona, if you know the story of La Llorona, because her son was taken away by Cortez. And it was quite interesting that Cortez goes back to Spain with this kid, Martin, actually marries, has a kid, and he names that kid Martin too. So it's kind of odd that he did things like that, and both his sons were named Martin. But anyways, La Malinche played a very important role in the conquest of Mexico. La Virgen de Guadalupe, she becomes the symbolic mother to many Mexicanos. So as you can kind of see in this image up here, she is a religious deity, but that many people say resembles, the Mary, the mother of Jesus. But if you notice, La Virgen de Guadalupe, she's dark. And you also see this kind of sun ray behind her. So a lot of people kind of talk about her more as a fusion of Catholic belief and indigenous belief. She's supposed to also symbolize and represent the sun goddess Tonantzin, who was a goddess of the Aztecs. And she appeared in the same place that Tonantzin was supposed to kind of reside in. So when we look at Mexican Catholicism and Latin American Catholicism, a lot of times it's a mixture of multiple cultures and not just one. So in Mexico, we have two women that play an important role. One is La Virgen, who everybody kind of prays to, and the other one is our mother, La Malinche, right? We're, as Mexicanos, we say we're hijos de la chingada because our father basically violated our mother, and we are the product of that conquest, we as Mexicanos. So these are the two kind of major figures, female figures in Mexican culture. But again, the Malinche played a very important role. She's a real entity, and she played a very important role in the conquest of Mexico. And then the last is the, what helped kind of bring the Aztec Empire down is not so much that Europeans were superior, they just had diseases that native people were not immune to, and smallpox devastated the local population. It is noted that about 30 to 40% of the population perished, and it was happening during the conquest. So people were getting sick, and these were diseases that the Europeans brought over, caused some form of biological warfare, and the Aztecs just started dwindling in numbers. One of their leaders, after Montezuma passed away, ended up dying of smallpox, and the person left to rule was Cuauhtemoc. Cuauhtemoc was the last Aztec emperor at this time. I want to stop it here, and I want you to look at some of these terms, and I won't ask you to fill these out, but just jot them down and look for them in the book, because again they'll show up on the exam, and just know them so you have them for the final. All right.